All right. Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm going to talk a little bit about like where we find out how many TDCs we have for each year to use on our projects, and also, show you the scenario how a $1 million project looks like in the three different scenarios that Catherine talked about, and also talk about the current TDC policy when it was first adopted, when it was updated, and what were the updates that were made to the existing policy in 2020. So next slide, please. So basically, the TDCs are not dollars. So these are credits. So because we are spending, our region is spending funds on a transportation system as a whole, we get some credits which we could use in lieu of local matching funds on a federally funded project. And the use of TDCs, like Catherine talked about, it allows 100% of reimbursement on eligible projects for eligible project costs. And available TDCs every year with the UTP approval in August, TechStart also informs us how many TDCs we will have or we have to use within the Unified Transportation Planning document, along with all the other 12 category allocations. And this Unified Transportation Program is approved every August. And we are also required to report to TechStart in every December how many TDCs, new TDCs we've used within that one calendar year. And in the 2025 UTP, because the 2026 UTP will be approved this year in August, we don't have that number. But in 2025, last August, when that was approved, we had 1 billion TDCs for use, and out of which we have so far expended about 203 million TDCs, with a remaining balance of 797 TDCs from the 2025 UTP. Go ahead, Catherine.
So real quick, you have 1 billion TDCs, and how much is your federal program again?
For the tip or which one?
Your 10-year time frame, but
Oh,
yeah, your
10
tip.
year. Oh,
Your tip.
just the tip. This year we have 20 billion tip, but within the 20 billion, it includes the category 11, category 4, category 12, and all those projects too. So, yeah.
So
20
basically
billion
what
tip.
I'm hearing is you have TDCs that would almost match your entire federal
Yeah,
program.
that is correct.
May I ask a clarification question
Yes.
as well? So the 1 billion TDCs, is that new that were allocated in 2025, or is that the overall balance?
That's the balance
Okay.
that has not
Thank you.
been used. Yeah.
And
Next
to
slide.
add on to her
Yeah.
question, about how many credits do we get every year? Or is that,
So that's not shown in a yearly allocation basis,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. So we just, UTP just provides how many TDCs we have available to use within our region.
no, I was just wondering, like, if we
Yeah.
used all of them this year, how many would we expect the following year or the next couple of years? So,
It
okay.
will, it will depend on how many federal funds you will spend on the other toll road projects.
Okay, so there's a formula.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a formula. Yeah, go ahead, Alan.
Mr. Chair, if I could say one more word about that. The TDCs have to be earned, and they have to be certified by the state, and they are provided to the state. And so really, you could ask this a different way. How many toll projects are we going to build next year? They're really earned in this state by the development of toll projects. And although this is considerably slowed down compared to some past times, we do have some continuing work. The one I can think of most is Grand Parkway. And in addition to that, Congress wanted to make sure states weren't just going toll road crazy. So he said, you cannot reduce your state expenditure. And you have to show that the toll road expenditure is basically adding to your state expenditure. In other words, states can't stop funding their highways with state money. They have to still keep their expenditures at past historic levels. So the state has to do all that certification. And then when they receive the results of that back from the federal government, they will apportion it the way it was described, based upon where those are being earned, the 75% share. And then the commission retains 25%, which it provides for a lot of different purposes, including statewide transit funding.
Next slide, Greg. So this chart basically shows the three scenarios for $1 million project. If we are doing a $1 million project in a traditional sense without TDCs, $800,000 comes from the federal sources, and the other $200,000 comes from the local match. And if we are using TDCs instead of using 80-20 federal local share, we will be using a $1 million, a total $1 million for the project in federal funds, and we will also show 200,000 TDCs as a match, and so in other words, the local government will be saving about $200,000 on spending on that project, which they could use on different projects, and then when we updated our TDC policy in 2020, the TPC created the Regional Strategic Transportation Fund. So with that fund, what we did is to make the projects that were at that point not eligible for TDCs, we made them eligible, and they can only be eligible for using TDCs if they contribute 50% of their required local match, which is 10% of the total project cost, into what we call the Regional Strategic Fund. I'm going to explain that policy a little more in the coming slides. Next slide, please, Greg. So just to give a little background, so the first TDC policy was adopted by the TPC in 2013, and we haven't seen any updates since then until 2020. So in that 2020, what we did is we made some projects that were previously not eligible to use TDCs. We made them eligible, such as the access management projects and livable centers projects. They could use TDCs, and the projects on other facilities, like not all, one other detail about TDCs is, like, according to the policy, we can only use them on regionally significant facilities, which means projects that are located on principal arterials or higher classified roadways. But with the creation of Regional Strategic Fund, what we did is we made the other roads that are not functionally classified as principal arterials, such as major collectors, eligible for TDCs to be used, but only in case if they contribute to the Regional Strategic Fund. And we have, so one of the other points in the current policy, or the policy in 2020, was we could only use the funds on a project when the project was being programmed in the beginning. Like, the first time the project is programmed with federal funds, that's when they can request TDCs, but the TDCs cannot be asked retroactively. But with the creation of Regional Strategic Fund, what we did is we let the projects that were previously programmed with federal funds with a commitment to contribute local match. We said those projects can retroactively ask for TDCs if they contribute to Regional Strategic Fund. And then because of the TDCs, our federal contribution is going to go up. There was a cap that was placed on the Regional Strategic Fund to increase federal funds only up to $100 million. Next slide, please. So the TDC policy goal. So what did the TPC want to do with the TDC policy is to advance regionally significant projects and also increase the flexibility of federal funding on these projects, and also to increase or maintain funding for key transportation activities within the region, such as air quality programs and safety programs, and such as tow and go program, and also support the local regional transit agencies, and also to support local community context for which those projects serve. And there were three priorities that 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 the TDC policy advances, which is regionally significant roadway added capacity projects and the support of transit funding within the region, and also use of TDCs on other regionally significant projects. Next slide, please. And I will explain what those three priorities are. So within the regionally significant added capacity projects, we are talking about only the projects that are located, added capacity projects that are located on principal arterials or higher classified roads. And these projects can also include additional benefits such as improvements to transit, bicycle pedestrian treatments, and also safety treatments on the project. And the second priority is support transit funding within the region, which means to assist transit agencies within the 8 county area to use TDCs instead of local matching funds on their formula funded projects. Next slide, please. And in the other regionally significant projects, it includes a lot of other types of projects, not just air capacity projects. These will include like freight rail projects addressing safety or capacity and reliability issues, and improved access to ports, major manufacturing facilities. These are basically the regional goods movement projects, and then regional traffic monitoring and management projects, which are basically ITS projects and construction of traffic management center projects, and also use of TDCs on HOV and HOT lanes, park and ride facilities, and various other non-formula funded transit projects. And this TDC update we did in 2020, that made the access management projects eligible for using the TDCs also, and also livable center studies. And also to support the regional strategies to promote reduction in vehicle emissions, which are basically air quality programs such as regional van pool projects. Next slide, please. And along with within the TDC policy, there is also discussion about the projects that are not going to be eligible for TDCs without contribution to the regional strategic fund. And those projects include standalone sidewalk and bike and pedestrian projects, and roadway projects that are on collector roads or local roads, which are functionally classified less than principal arterial, and also roadway maintenance and repaving and reconstruction projects without regionally significant added capacity component. So if you are just reconstructing a roadway, a 2-lane road to a 2-lane road, without an expansion, we cannot use the TDCs on that road without a contribution to the regional strategic fund. Next slide, please. And the TDC, the process to award the TDCs is basically the sponsors will request TDCs to the MPO by applying through or submitting a form, a TDC form, which they can fill it up online by going to our website. They within the form, what they will provide is basically what the project is and what priority does it meet within the TDC policy and how much TDCs they require. And once they submit the application, the staff will review the application, and then if it is eligible, if the project is eligible to receive TDCs, then we will bring it forward to the TPC, and finally TDCs are only going to be approved or only going to be put on the project if the TPC approves the project. Next slide, please. And So now I'm going to hand it over to Callie Barnes, who is going to be talking about the Regional Strategic Fund.
Mr.
Good
Chair, if I can
morning.
ask a few questions,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's for Vishu or for the HEAC group. My questions are a little naive, so bear with me.
Right.
Does one TDC equate to $1?
No.
No? When you
Well,
say you have a
so
billion
it's a-
billion TDC, does it equate to $1 billion?
No. So it's a. Let me answer in a different way. So it will if you're looking at it as a local matching fund. So for example, like I said in the three funding scenarios that I showed, can we go back to the chart? So here, $1 million project can use only up to 200,000 TDCs, right? So your 200,000 local dollars are becoming 200,000 TDCs, but it's not the same. I don't know. They're not dollars, first of all, and I don't know how to answer your question. Alan, do you? It is.
Yeah, I always say it
Is-
this way.
is it-
First of all,
yeah.
TDCs are not cash. But what they can do is they can allow you to convert a project that would normally require a 20% local match to 100% federally funded project, provided there are enough federal funds available for that project. And of course, that would come back to this body for approval. So potentially it would allow the local government to use that match money for other transportation activities in the community, which normally wouldn't be either, maybe wouldn't be federally eligible or be very difficult to get federal funding for. So let's say that you wanted to put that money back into sidewalk improvements or intersection improvements where, individually the intersections are not that expensive and it's hard to turn that into a federally funded project. So, but the TDCs themselves are not cash, and they're only useful when we have enough federal money to pay for the project, whatever the project is.
It's like a coupon.
Yeah.
You can
Yeah.
turn that coupon in to get a matching dollar, but you can't take that coupon and go buy something at the grocery store.
It's a credit with no purchasing
Right.
power on its own.
Just
No
another
value.
follow-up question. So I heard that it's the TechStart who banks the TDCs for this region. Is that correct? And who is the holder of all the TDC credits for the region? Who holds the TDCs for this region? Is it TechStart or HGAC or kind of combination?
Well, remember, it's just a credit that's reported each year in the UTP. The balance is reported. And they're identified through the investments made, and then a certain percentage of that comes back to this region for use.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We do, TechStop,
Yeah.
TechStop.
That's TechStart. Yeah.
Yeah, part of the problem is we talk about TDCs every time we're talking about projects, but when they're actually used is when those funds are obligated. And that's why really the state's in the best position to keep track of how many of the TDCs that they have made available to us have been used. But they're only used when the funds, when you actually obligate the project funding. And for most people, that's when you do your AFA with TxDOT. And they obligate those.
Actually, it's tied to the TIP amendment. The TIP amendment every month, if TDCs are included on there, the TIP amendment's very clear and staff is attaching the application, the TDC application, showing how they meet the criteria of the policy. So that's where they're reported, and then that's rolled up and reported to TxDOT so that balances can be adjusted.
And can I add one thing from the transit perspective, something Alan said, which was that you would ask for the TDCs for offsetting federal dollars and come to HAC to get those federal dollars. For transit agencies, that's not necessarily the case. We get our dollars directly from the Federal Transit Administration through formula grant funds. I get my set amount of money every year. I don't need to ask TxDOT for let's say, permission to use it. We do coordinate in the tip what we're going to spend the money on. We come to HJC, we come to the TAC for approval of that, right? Of planning operations, but it's not asking, I just want to make sure that's clear. It's not asking HJC for more federal money for transit. That comes from our formula funds.
Right.
Catherine, you look confused.
I'm a little confused by that, and it's probably because I don't understand transit funding. But HGAC's policy specifically makes the TDCs that are given to the policy council.
No, the TDCs, yes. I'm just talking about the overall federal dollars we get.
The formula funded projects, Catherine, so those are not allocated to us, but they are apportioned to the UZA by federal FTA to the transit agency and the UZA to use, yeah. That is through the TIP and MPO.
That's
yeah.
my point.
Yes, I
understand you
agree.
get
No,
the
I was
federal
talking-
transit dollars, but the TDCs are the policy councils to give you. And
Yes,
their policy has been to support transit
correct.
in
It's
totality.
just that when we get the TDCs from HJC, we're not taking federal dollars away from HJC
Right.
money. That's
Right.
what my point
That's a good
is.
point.
That's the point that I'm
So
trying
our
to make.
federal
Yeah.
contribution is not getting reduced because of the transit.
Unless it's.
Can I ask,
Unless it's a certain category of funding. So like, for instance, our carryover spin down buses, that actually did for that situation.
And that's why I said our annual federal apportionment of formula
Formula
funding
fund.
that I get directly because of my UZA
Yeah.
from the Federal Transit Administration
On a typical
on a
project.
typical project.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The exceptions to the rule sometimes, but very seldom.
Can I ask a quick
Clear as
question?
mud.
Okay, so citizen interest person, not transportation person. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, and I probably am wrong. The TDCs don't add to the overall pool of money. They just let you allocate money in a different way than you normally would. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. Those of us who've dealt with federal money generally know the cardinal, rule: you can't match a federal dollar with another federal dollar, generally. This is one of those exceptions. We put that coupon or credit on top of another federal dollar and we can use it as match. It doesn't change the amount of federal money available, right?
Right.
And it is not cash. So you got to, to Alan's point, you have to have enough federal money to do the whole project. Or in the other example, you make your project smaller. Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks.
I'm going to touch on that subject because I think I have a really simple way to explain it, but it may just confuse everybody more, but hopefully it is. Hopefully it's really simple.
Well, give it
Because
a shot.
Vishu and I had a conversation the other day and I was like, really? Oh, it's like that. So I'm going to explain it to you how I understood it for the first time fully, which is, so I'm going to explain to you the Regional Strategic Transportation Fund program, but that is essentially just embedded in our TDC policy. So when you look at the policy, it goes over the TDCs, what you just learned from Catherine and Vishu, but the Regional Strategic Program is actually like a subset at the very end of that TDC policy because it's tied into the use of TDCs, right? So this TDC policy that has the Transportation Fund, Regional Strategic Transportation Fund program embedded within that was approved in November 2020, which we've already been through. So instead of a project having 100% of a total project cost and an 80% federal and a 20% local match, essentially it's like, I love the word coupon. I think that's a great way to, yes. So you get your 20% coupon for TDCs. But with that coupon, you're taking that 20%, you have to have 100% federal. So that 20% is, say you have $100 million in your bucket of category 5, 7, 9, and 10. You got $100 million right there. And you got an 80-20 project. And instead of the 20%, you can say, hey, HJC, I want to use your TDCs. So instead of your $10 million project being, 80% covered from your federal funds, you're taking the full federal amount out of your $100 million bucket. So it counts against your federal availability. So that I think is what needs to be like really clear, because we talked earlier today about, or Vishu did, about having less funds than we typically have historically been used to having. So the TDCs, in my opinion, are a really good use for situations where we have a lot of over, carry over balances. And that's a situation we were in before. But this is why I think we need to kind of rethink this a little bit, because your 20% that you would have been contributing is going to be coming out of your available available funding for the region, for the whole region. So that $100 million, that 20% is benefiting you, but it's coming out of somewhere. It's coming out of your federal allowance, if you will. And so to go into the regional program, that 20%, instead of you contributing the 20%, you're going to get your 20% coupon. 20% is going to be deducted from your federal allowance over here, or your budget. And so instead of the 20%, you're going to put in 10%. So federal money covers your whole project at that point. Your coupon is your coupon. However, that coupon, you're going to be asked to do something for that coupon. You don't just get to say HEB, here you go, and walk away. That coupon, we're going to commit you to contributing 10% into a regional strategic transportation fund program, which is just an extra pot of money over here, which is intended not to have federal ties. So you're supposed to get through that project development process, hopefully quicker. So there'll be a bit of pot over here for your 10%, of which would have been 20, right? You're taking your 10. And then the other 10%, you can contribute to another transportation project of any choosing of your, jurisdiction in the future. The policy isn't very specific to the date of which you're tied to contribute that other 10% to transportation. And it's not really very specific into what kind of transportation project. I've had that question come about a lot. So dug into this policy, the regional policy, and it's very vague. And so that's something to consider too. Do we want it to be vague if we keep this policy? So that hopefully your coupon isn't just a freebie. You're committed to taking 10% and putting it into our pot of money for future selection, which we'll talk about in a minute. And your other 10% will go towards any transportation in your region with no federal ties. It's something you probably had on the books anyway, potentially. Next
Hey,
slide, please. Go ahead.
Golly, real quick.
Sure.
So let me say back to you what I think you just said, okay, and put some numbers around it so I understand it. And in fact, the way you said the coupon and the way you, I guess, redeem it, those types of things made more sense of how this works. So in some of the slides, let's take $1 million project, federal project. We're going to get 200,000 is going to be the local match. So the feds are going to pay $800,000. But if it qualifies for TDC, I'm going to get credit for my $200,000. It assumes there's an availability of $200,000 in the pot of money to put there. So then my $200,000, 100,000 of that, I'm going to put up for some future project, and the other 100,000 I can use locally on transportation related projects.
Correct.
Maybe alternate modes. It might be a trail. It might be street improvements or whatever, but it
Yeah.
has to be capital.
The only clarification I would make is that you hit it right on. That first 100,000 of your 200 that you're going to put, it's going to go into a pot, and it's going to be selected. We're going to talk about that in the next slide. It's going to be selected by TPC. So it'll just grow exponentially. And I've got some numbers I can give you.
Is it earmarked back to the jurisdiction that put it up?
So the
Or does it just
the
go
first
into-
100,000 goes into the pot that'll be selected by this body in the future for certain kinds of projects as we decide from this.
Okay.
And the second 100,000 goes into anything you would like in your jurisdiction.
Okay.
And so, but that pot will be nice because it won't have federal ties. We're essentially kind of washing the federal ties from that. So,
Okay.
but it will be, it'll grow as we get more projects into the regional program, that pot. And this TPC will have the ability to select the certain kinds of projects that you want to see come to fruition from that pot of money.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Verena, you might.
Well, just to clarify though, I don't think, is there a hard policy that the second 100,000 that the locals save has to go into transportation at the local, within that local jurisdiction?
It's specific to transportation. There's not there's no timeline associated with it right now. It says other transportation project.
Okay. You're talking about the 100,000 they keep.
that they keep, that they
Okay.
go, yeah. And there's
Okay.
no, I've had that question, they're like, well, when do we
Okay.
have to spend it by? I'm like, well, it doesn't really say.
How is that monitored?
Things to consider. We haven't had a project successfully go through, and that's part of the point, a regional strategic transportation fund program yet. We haven't, I think Ally's got some. I haven't had any through the transportation and TIP. I think there was some other studies that have successfully gone through the interlocal agreement execution, but none from our TIP timeline roadway projects. So we'll have to ask her about those and how she's monitoring those. I'm not aware of those. We have 6 right now that have requested to be part of the program, around $145 million, $143 million, which means there will be potentially $43 million. This is some good math for $43 million will potentially, if those are successful, go into the pot so that you'll come back. And then this doesn't include the ones that Ally's has headed up with another group. And then there will be another $43 million, but that's each individual has that sliver of their 10% to go put into their jurisdiction sometime. And that's a good point. How do we want to track that? Right now, there's nothing in the current policy that states that we need to track it. It doesn't state when it has to happen. What kind of project do we want to see it occur on? So these are things, the reasons why we're here having these discussions. It's just telling you about the current policy that was created before most of our time.
Callie, would that be something to take back take back to the TAC on a policy around tracking? Because we do need to
Sure.
track because we don't need to oversubscribe it. Then we're in trouble.
I agree. So on the slides, that'll be the final slides that Ally will go over. It's kind of like, do we still want the policy? Does this regional strategic transportation, I mean, TDCs exist, that's fine. What do we do with them? Fine. But then this regional strategic transportation fund, keeping in mind that our budget is getting smaller and that we have to use, that coupon isn't free. We got to deduct the amount the coupon's worth from the available balances we have. Is this something we really still like? We have to answer that question first. And if it is, then yeah, we need to talk about the tracking for sure. That's a, yeah. When I read that in the current policy, I was like, wow, because people started asking me, they were smart. They were reading the policy. They said, what kind of project do I have to put this on? And then when does it have to be done by? And I was like, well, to be honest, in the policy, it doesn't state. So that's part of the reason why we need to kind of open up those discussions.
And Callie, can I ask a clarifying question? The TDCs, that's a state program. It's this bigger program.
Mhm.
The Regional Strategic Transportation Fund is a wholly HGAC created product vehicle program.
It is. And so my former supervisor, Adam Beckham, had something similar, not exactly the same from my understanding, at NCT COG in Dallas, Fort Worth. So they have something similar, but not the same. But yes, it's a HGC TPC adopted policy, and it is literally like embedded in our TDC policy. So as you're printing it out, it's like the tail end.
But
of
it's
it.
up to the region whether we keep it or not. Right?
Correct.
Okay.
Up to the policy council.
Right, yeah. Yeah, the region meaning the elected, yeah, yeah, yeah. But that's kind of why we're discussing, what do we think about it as a group now and to present to them to consider. Next slide, please. And this is my last slide. So, but this is just stating, again, what do we have in the current policy? And this was, inherited, right? So we talked about that pot of money that would be growing as we're putting more projects into the regional program, assuming we keep the regional strategic program. And those are competitively selected by TPC. Those should, the intention, I don't know if the policy clearly states this, the intention is to wash the federal ties from that money. So then projects get expedited a lot quicker, eliminating some federal red tape. So that is the intention of the policy. I don't know if that's clear. And then the kinds of projects in the current policy are from that selection of the pot are usually, it says like potential cap of around $1 to $2 million. So the intention when the policy was written was to select projects of a smaller scale, $1 to $2 million that fit these sort of categories: non-state routes in rural areas, maintenance and preservation of roadways in small urban, rural, and economically disadvantaged areas, investment in local active transportation projects, and safety improvements to address pedestrian conflict points and intersections. So this is specifically called out as the kinds of projects, $1 to $2 million, that TPC would be encouraged, I guess, because it doesn't say that these are the only projects. The policy's vague again in this area and up for discussion. And then also support the regional grant applications from HGSE. And that concludes the part that for the regional program of the current policy that I was presenting. And then I think Ally's going to take it from here.
Ask a question?
Yep, go ahead.
So I kind of heard that this coupon is not applicable for all projects. For example, if we have a multimodal trail project, I think I saw that it's not applicable. So who makes that decision? It's a federal decision or is it a decision for the TPC here?
For TDC use, right? So who makes the decisions? I think that's up to you,
It
Catherine.
was a TPC. It's baked into the TPC policy that was approved first in 2013, 2014, and again amended in 2020, creating the Regional Strategic Transportation Fund. I don't know that it was really the intent of the Policy Council to limit the use of the Regional Strategic Transportation Fund to only small projects. My interpretation of that was it's a good use of the funds because you have smaller projects that are, $500,000, 1.5 million. There's just the economies of scale isn't there to have to go through the federal process to deliver a $500,000 project. And yet by the time you deliver it, you've spent more than what the project would have cost you. And so that was pointed out as one of the benefits is if local governments could have some of these smaller projects be funded through a regional strategic transportation fund, it would eliminate the red tape of federal. Personally, it would eliminate some of the burden on us for oversight, contracting, all of that other stuff, because you would just come to the MPO, get the money, and deliver the project. The other thing that hasn't been discussed here, not all projects that you deliver, all projects pretty much that the state delivers, but not all projects that you deliver are actually even eligible for federal funds. You have to be a major collector or higher, functionally classified as a major collector or higher, generally, to get federal funds. A lot of projects have come through this policy council, and let me say, not a lot, but I can think of about 3 that came through that were minor collector. And they were awarded funds, and later on, we had to come back and say, nope, those projects weren't actually eligible. And now we figured out some workarounds and made it happen. But it, and this Regional Strategic Transportation Fund would open the door for projects that are important to this region that the Policy Council determines are important, but that may not be eligible for federal funds.
So I just want to make sure we're clear. There are some rules about TDC applicability, eligibility. However, if cash contribution to the regional fund is made because an eligible project got TDCs, then the use of that cash, subject to TPC's policy and approval, there's no restriction at this point on the types of projects. Okay, so I hope, so it's TDCs has restrictions or eligibility criteria that do not exist for the use of the cash in the regional fund deposits.
That Regional Strategic Transportation Fund balance would be at the sole discretion of the Policy Council for what it determines it would fund. And so it's a good opportunity. I also think that the policy should be opened up to look at the eligibility for the participation. You can grow it. You can, to Ruth Ann's point, we can monetize. I mean, what we're talking about when we say you'll contribute to the Regional Strategic Transportation Fund, essentially 50 cents on the dollar, right? So if your local match was $200,000 and you deposited in cash $100,000, you paid 50 cents on the dollar, and then you got 100% of the project funded through federal funds. I think there's an opportunity to monetize more of that and actually convert something that has no purchasing power into something that has a lot of purchasing power. And it's simultaneously beneficial for participants.
But do we run if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, do we run the risk of potentially taking dollars that could or should be spent towards transportation to potential projects that are non-transportation related?
Well, and so
The way the
again,
policy is set up now.
perhaps, and as I pointed out, every other agency that generally comes and receives, in general, not specifically, but in general, every other agency that comes and receives federal funds through the tip, other than the transit agencies and TxDOT, could divert that savings, that 20% that you did not have to put up. You could, nothing is contractually requiring you to then turn around and spend that on another transportation project. In theory, your council or your commission or your governing body could choose to put that money on something else. So there's no guarantee that that's going back into the transportation system.
And because the language is so vague in the RSTF policy, it makes the interlocal agreements that Callie's been working on have a little less teeth because there's not a deadline for when they need to deliver. Their 10% that they've retained to implement projects in their jurisdiction, there's, a little less authority in that ILA.
Yeah. I'm going to give one more example. And yeah, I agree. I don't have any executed ones. Like you've got some executed ones under your group that you sent an email. I don't have any executed ones right now, but just to give you an example, I put my 10 up like Dr. Lewis always did. So give you an example of going back to like, yes, it's a good program. Yes, it's got a lot of pros and then it's got some cons. I'm going to give you an example of we have 6 projects that want to be part of the Regional Strategic Transportation Fund program right now, right? They've already officially requested $145 million. That's a total cost, right? So that's $43 million and $43 million. You got $86 million as your 20%. Do we have $86 million? I don't think we have, we're just barely, maybe, I think I remember 80 something, 85-ish. So we gotta like really kind of think about step one, I think, is like, we have to have the 20% in our available balance to cover what we're looking at doing in the future. So I just want to give that good example, because right now we have 6 requested. And that doesn't include the ones that Ally's already have executed. So I don't know where those funds are, if those are accounted for and.
They're much smaller amounts.
True,
Yeah.
yeah. So I just want to give you all that number and just keep in your heads of what you want to do with the federal dollars.
I want to ask a question real quick, back to Catherine's point. But if I understand, I mean, it might not be, define what's not transportation related. Because I couldn't, under the scenario I said a while ago, where 100,000 goes into a fund here, 100,000 I keep local, I couldn't use that 100,000 for cops. But I could use it for sidewalks, trails, alternative transportation needs. Maybe I put it into micro transit. I don't know. There's a slippery slope there that we need to define, because I could see jurisdictions saying, okay, I'm going to put it in, buy an ambulance.
Yeah, Miracle, I think the challenge is because you have some ability to fungibly move things around in your budgets, right?
Right.
You're going to spend 100,000 on transportation. Yeah. How do we document that that's like a maintenance of effort, right? That is kind of incrementally not redirected to some other place within your overall transportation program. That's really hard, right? It's less hard to say you're going to spend $100,000 on transportation. We can do that, but it's, did you now move 100,000 that you were going to spend on transportation somewhere else to another purpose? That gets much more difficult. A little easier for us personally, because we have dedicated constrained funding sources, and some of you do too.
Yeah, if I've got a budget,
actually move it somewhere else.
Yeah, if I have a budget for sidewalks of $100,000 and I take this and put it and replace that 100,000, not do 200,000, but 100,000 there, I could take that budget line item and move it over here, and I've just now helped fund a police officer or whatever. That's, I would think, I want to make sure that, I mean, we're seeing on the national level, you know, waste, fraud and abuse and everything else. Last thing we need is to have a system that's set up that 5, 6, 10 years down the road, we go, ooh, that probably wasn't the best way to do that. We probably need to define it better.
Yeah.
So a couple thoughts. You know, why did we create this thing to begin with? The idea was that 50 cents of non-federal money could probably buy $2 worth of what you could have gotten if it had federal money because of all the hoops you had to go through. And then, as Catherine said, a lot of smaller dollar projects are never going to get consideration. And I can remember our TPC chairman saying, what I need is $500,000 just to repave a lot of roads that are crumbling away in parts of my precinct. So there is no opportunity to bring any kind of funding to a partnership for the maintenance, say, of rural roads. But I think we're also, we really overworked this. And I apologize for some of the flaws in this program since I had a hand in it. But to be honest, I have not heard any local government that's talking about cutting back its expenditure for transportation-related items. My feeling is that we look at the value of the potential things we could do to help advance transportation needs from a non-federal transportation fund, and we say that's enough. There's enough benefit there that we trust the local governments are not just suddenly going to take vacations with what they would have spent as local match. For that matter, if a local government is getting any federal money for a project, would that have been something they would have funded otherwise? I mean, we're asking the wrong question. If we're asking the local government to go through some elaborate documentation process on how they're going to use half of what they would have spent for match. Really what our big picture is, let's make it easier to turn some of this money into multiple projects in places where we would not have invested before, but have critical transportation needs, safety, operations, capacity, those kinds of things. So I think it was a bad idea to do that, and our somewhat marginally larger neighbor to the north, up at the North Central Texas COG and that big North Central Texas region, they just look at this as a cash deal. You buy, if you want to buy the credits, they will sell you the credits, so to speak. This is really a transaction, right? Except that we're actually investing in a fund that you, the policy council, will have a chance to decide how to best leverage that money for the many investments that would otherwise not been good, viable investments for all the federal reasons. Now, I had a different problem. My problem was with the agreement that HGAC actually developed, because it was developed for a purpose that was completely inappropriate for transportation projects. And I can tell you, I'll never recommend our agency purchase TDCs unless HGAC can change that agreement. The first thing they said in the agreement was that everything we spent the money on had to be spent as if it was federal money. Well, that was the purpose
Yeah,
of,
agree.
well, we're getting federal money anyway, so I mean, that's not a problem, but the
You're 100% right,
TDCs,
Alan. I
we
agree
don't
on
want to
this.
carry that. So one thing this committee needs to do is it needs to say to HGAC, look, we need to look at this agreement on TDCs. It ought to be a lot simpler. It doesn't involve federal money. Let's don't put a bunch of federal language into it, et cetera, et cetera. I also said things like HJC is going to own the project. What did that mean? And I could not get people to change that.
Right.
So
The draft interlocal agreement has some issues, we'll call it, and Alan and I agree wholeheartedly on this one. But when you get a lawyer over here and a lawyer over here and me and Alan in the middle and me and another, it's like, so yeah, the interlocal agreement template 100% needs to be like rewritten specifically for this program. But one little tiny token of with the other project, I think the pot of money, I've been dealing with local government sponsors in this regional strategic program for since about 3 years. Adam introduced me to me about 2.5 years. I've been trying to convince that he sold it to me, and I was like, this is brilliant. So I just want to offer just with the discussions I've had, I think that the pot of money and stripping those federal requirements has huge merit, right?
Yes.
But the other transportation project, the way that I've had these discussions and the questions that I've been asked is essentially, we were going to do, what can we use that money for? It's like something that was already on the books. So like, what is the merit of that? If you just, it's already on the books and that's what people were going to be doing. And there's no really required timeline to do it within. So people were reading between the lines and figuring out how they could work the system. And I don't really know if there's much merit in the other project. So maybe the more the merit is to take the 20% and put it all in the regional strategic, but then you're putting in 20%, you don't get your 50% discount. So I'm not really sure what the merit is, but I know the intention was good. But if you're going to keep the other project in there, it should somehow be encouraged to be, something that's not already on the books. But but we don't have time to document all that either. So we're already going to have a hard time documenting, I don't know about the documentation part, but I just wanted to kind of, the merits of that other project are a little iffy.
I think at some level there will need to be some documentation. We got to figure that out. We just need to figure out at what level. And I'm not talking about a single audit, that you have to do on certain types of, I'm not talking about that because you've just blown your savings. But something very simple, to do that. And I do like the opportunity because every jurisdiction that's represented in this 8-county region has small localized improvements for safety and other things that they could go through their city or their county and go, I have a project here and I have one here and I have one here. And it adds up to $500,000 with 10 projects. And they just never rise to the level of it and they don't have the cash to go do that.
Or
But
the
if there's
time.
but we can.
I had a sponsor call me last week and say, yes, Callie, you gave me the funds and the carryover spend down, but I don't want them. I said, how much is the project? Because I need to spend them. It was only like 1.5. And I was like, I get it. He doesn't have time to go through the process. There's accidents happening and people getting hurt and it's a safety project.
Correct.
It's of smaller scale. It's 1.5
Right.
million. It would have been perfect for this,
Yeah, so I think there's a
yeah.
benefit to having
There
this. I
is.
think we need to look at the policy in general, but I think we also need to be very careful that with the dollars in the next 10 years that are going to be lesser, making sure that we don't eat it up, right? So there may be a day on the other side of that where there's more dollars, but we just need to be real careful how we subscribe it. So.
And Mayor, the other thing that really needs to be looked at, and sorry, Ally, I see you had to your point earlier that you said, there's no policy or no guidance right now within the policy that says who's eligible to apply for those funds. If only Pearland has put in all the money, then is it really fair that City of Houston comes and gets it all? I don't know, That's also something that needs to be looked at as you implement a policy, you grow your balances. Now, you need to think that
Yeah, if you
through.
put dollars in, do you have some opportunity to get that dollar out to use, on a non-federal,
Because if you don't incentivize
Right.
people to put in.
You
knowing that
do
they
have the
won't put in.
opportunity, but you're in it with everybody else and that maybe didn't, but the way the policy is now.
Right.
Yeah.
And can I just, I feel like it's, my name is Ruth Ann Hout. I am with the Woodlands, it's the Conroe Woodlands urbanized area. I run the transit agency, the Woodlands Express in the Town Center Trolleys. It's a transit agency, just to give people context. I guess not everyone knows me. And so I feel just obligated to have like a transit perspective on this because it is different than a municipality. To Catherine's point with Arthur's story and the way it's set up in the dollars, because if I pay into the strategic fund, I'm funding a roadway with essentially what would have gone to a transit project for me, right? Because all my federal dollars are transit. I don't have that option outside of it, just to your point. Yeah.
Just remember though, that the policy already puts transit in there as a recipient.
Right.
Period.
Correct. I just want to make sure that we're seeing that through the lens that is, we're adding layers to it, the policy and different layers to it, that there's ways that I could get hemmed in unintentionally, right? Unintended consequences that for transit, we just need to look at it from a different angle and just keep that in mind. And there's only a few of us in the room, but it greatly impacts us. And that's kind of my point, is just kind of an overall statement on that front, is that we do have to view our funding a little bit differently and how things flow through and what projects we're able to do.
You have a good point with the carryover spend down. where we were highly encouraging, not requiring, highly encouraging folks to be part of the Regional Strategic Transportation Fund as part of that carryover spend down project program. Transit, there was several transit agencies that just said, no, we can't benefit from the pot. Why would we contribute? So I heard a lot of that. So it's a very valid point and very good consideration for today.
But let me say, I think the Policy Council's first priority in looking at this whole thing with TDCs is let's make sure we're maximizing the federal investment in our region. So that's one of the reasons why there is a statement that specifically supports the transit formula funds, because if we don't have the funds to match them, we can't use them somewhere else. They'll be lost. Another place that we made a provision was we can make a provisional allocation of TDCs for projects that are competing for federal discretionary money. That would be new money to our region. And then if the applicant actually gets an award, it could receive potentially the TDCs. It'd still be requested from the Policy Council. But again, that's bringing more money into the region. And then the last big piece was sometimes we could just do a lot more if the money wasn't federal. And a lot of things that were important, either because they're smaller or because the federal processes that would be required would really be difficult or not even eligible. So those were the big picture things. And I think the challenge today is, are those still our big goals? And how do we do it now that we're much more fiscally constrained in terms of financial dollars? What still makes sense? Where are we still multiplying the overall investment to the region?
Well, and
Good question.
it's all great discussion. I want to get Ally to give her presentation because she might answer some of those. But you know, if I want something and normally it's $100 and it's on sale for 75, I saved 25%, but I still spent $75. And so there's no such thing as free money. So, but I want to let Ally get on her because she might answer some of the questions that we're talking about now.
Well, my portion of this workshop was really to ask questions, and a lot of you have already asked those of each other. So Greg, you can go to the next